Hello, and welcome to the Well Beyond Breast Cancer podcast. I'm Shira, a breast cancer previvor and your host. This show shines a much-needed light on what comes after diagnosis, the side effects, the recovery, and the real-life journey of feeling like yourself again. Each episode brings real stories and expert guidance from oncology and rehabilitation professionals so you can better understand and manage side effects and truly live well beyond breast cancer. Thanks for being here. Today, we are honored to be joined by Sadia Zapp, Managing Director of Communications and Content at the Breast Cancer Research Foundation. As a nonprofit leader, Sadia brings both professional expertise and personal perspective to the breast cancer space after being diagnosed with stage 2 HR-positive breast cancer at the young age of 36. Sadia, thank you so much for joining us today, and it's so wonderful to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to chat today.
I'm excited to chat with you. I think that there's such an interesting perspective that you can give us from being on both sides of the coin, of being so passionate about something, and then that something coming to you personally is a very unique perspective. So I want to start off with this first question. You spent years advocating for breast cancer research at the Breast Cancer Research Foundation. What was the moment when your work suddenly became personal, and how did that change the way you saw everything?
So at this point, I've been at BCRF for 11 years. At the time, I had been working there for 7 years, and it had always been personal. During that time, I spent 7 years meeting patients and women going through the disease. And so I felt really connected to the cause. And by then, my sole job is to talk about this disease. So I had to know it inside and out. So I learned and I knew so much about breast cancer. But once I was diagnosed, I realized that I knew nothing, that everything that I thought I knew was just surface level. I could know all of the facts. I could know about the biology of the disease. I could really understand it and not know it. And that's what I learned really quickly as a patient, is that the experience of the disease is so much deeper and complex and really layered in a way that you can't really learn. You can't read that kind of experience.
Yeah, you have to go through it with your
Hmm.
mind, body, and soul. It's not
Hmm.
something you read in a textbook.
Right.
So I wonder, before your diagnosis, what did you think survivorship and recovery looked like?
Hmm.
And then what did you realize you were getting completely wrong once you experienced it yourself?
Well, I met all of these women who'd been through the disease, and I met women who passed from the disease. So I'd experienced this myriad of seeing women thrive and really move on, and those who were gone and have experienced grief. But what I always thought before was, at some point, you get over it. Like you move on and it's over. I really had no idea what the ripple effects also were, not just for the individual patient, but for your loved ones, for your family. I've heard someone use this phrase and I love it. It's not a me disease, it's a we disease. And it impacts so many people outside of just the sole patient. And second, it's just that long term, the long term living with. Right now it's not visible anymore to people, right? Like my hair grew back. I'm out and about. I feel good. I look good, but every single month I'm still back at the hospital to get my Lupron shot. Every few months when I have to go in to see my oncologist now, it's still very present in my life, in my daily life, because I'm always wondering about, like, did I exercise enough today? Did I eat enough vegetables today? So it's so present in my life in a way that's invisible to everybody else. And so that's
Interesting.
something I learned through the experience.
Because you think that, when you get diagnosed with something like that, I can imagine that you think it's in that moment, and then it's done. That's
Yeah,
what
like once
survivorship
active
is.
treatment is over, they must be fine.
Right.
Even if you're on even if you're on drugs, you really don't understand what it is to be on, anti-cancer drugs for years. For me, it'll
Sure.
be 10 years that I'll have to be on it, but what
Sure.
those side effects are and how it impacts your daily life, it's just not something that is easy to understand until you've had to experience it. But that is something I learned, is that it's a daily experience. Some days it's more on my mind than others. So that is one thing I remember one patient said to me in the very beginning of my journey. She said to me, "One day, I know it's really hard to imagine right now, but one day, just a day will go by where you didn't think about it." She said, "One day, a day will go by where you didn't think about your breast cancer." And I couldn't imagine it at the time.
Sure.
And I finally kinda get what she means. There are days
Mhm.
where I think about breast cancer every day. It's my job to think about breast cancer every day, but there are
Sure.
moments where I have windows where I'm not thinking of my disease. Like, I'm thinking about the disease, but I'm not thinking about it in terms of my experience and my fears and
No,
my,
for
all of that. So, I finally see that, and I'm glad she had said that to me. I did hold on to it for a long time just thinking, "I hope she's right, I hope she's right," and she was right.
I can imagine that hope and that also disbelief in the same,
Mhm.
mouth that, like, to hear someone say that, "Don't worry, one day will come where you're just like, you don't even think about it," while
Yeah,
it's all and everything that you're thinking
yeah,
about in that moment.
yep.
So that reality, I'm glad that you're able to experience that reality. As someone deeply embedded in the marketing of BCR, did the clinical knowledge help you emotionally, or did it
Mm.
actually make parts of the experience harder?
I was just talking about this yesterday, actually, with someone, which is that the good news for me was when I was initially diagnosed, it's a shock for so many people. And a lot of people then have to go and Google, what is breast cancer? What does this mean? What does hormone receptor positive disease mean? I was so lucky. Didn't I could have that immediate conversation with the doctor and ask about my subtype. What does this mean? Like, what kind of treatments am I going to be on? I could ask about the specific treatments that I knew about. So I knew the lingo. I spoke breast cancer already, which made it a lot easier for me. The problem is that I also, because of my job having to talk about breast cancer, we also have to talk a lot about urgency and how much we don't know. Big part of my job is to talk about what we don't know yet and what we have yet to learn. That's scary as hell when you are going through the disease. So I had to really, I mean, I couldn't in the beginning. I just couldn't shut that part of my brain off thinking about the bad stats, what it means to be diagnosed when you're this young, because it's very different to be diagnosed at a younger age. The biology of the disease is different and it means different things for long-term recurrence and survival. And I just that was hard. That was hard. I got through it, but I had to develop some techniques to try to shut that part of my brain off. And one of my girlfriends actually, because I told you I've at that point 7 years of patience of hearing stories, good and bad.
Sure.
I couldn't help but just think about the bad ones. Like I couldn't help but just think about the sad stories. And my girlfriend said to me, "Don't adopt other people's stories as your own. Like, use other people's stories only to inform your experience and as a data point, but do not use it to become your story. It is not your story." And that actually was truly a life-changing mantra for me at that time, because that's what I had needed to hear given my, like, profession and job and just all of the things that I just had too much. I had TMI, I had way too much information in my brain.
Sure. I think that that's something that we all do. I mean, you're in a very unique position at working at BCRF and then being diagnosed with your diagnosis and having all that information and experience and all of that. But I think that goes for anything these days with social media and just
Mhm,
media in general. We're just being faced with so much information and stories and personal stories that we swallow it as our own and it affects us. So it really
mhm,
like or to understandably because that's all you're seeing is you start to see these stories and you kind of make them into your own stories and then that's going to be your path. But I think what your girlfriend said is so on point that really use it as information, but not
Mhm.
your destiny,
And I
which I
learned
think
like, I'm so glad that she said that to me, not just because like I said, I kept thinking about the bad stories, but even going through treatment, what I realized is I would ask people about when I was going through chemo, the types of chemo that you're on. You hear all about this, the red devil, and what all the side effects are, how bad it is, Taxol, what it's like to be on Taxol. So I would take these data points, and I quickly learned my experience and everyone else's experience is so different. Your body, your individual body reacts to chemo so differently than others potentially, right? And so I learned quickly that I could ask everybody and try really hard to prepare for what to expect when it comes to chemotherapy. But none of that knowledge mattered in the end because it just depends on what your body does and how your body reacts. So I learned quickly, like, yes, I could use it as data points. I could be prepared that, I'm gonna be tired. I'm gonna be really fatigued by round 3. I'm gonna be really fatigued with Taxol, but my experience was so different than a lot of the ones that I heard from others. So now whenever someone asks me what's it like, whenever I talk to a new patient that wants to know what this was like or that was like, I always add that caveat, just so you know, it might be totally different for you.
100%. I think that goes without saying for any experience that a human experiences these days
Right.
that every body is different.
Yeah.
So, people have asked me about my surgery, about the immediate deep. They're like, "How
Mhm.
did you feel? How
Yeah.
was it for you?" And I'm like, "I can tell you how it was for me, but that is probably not going to be the same experience for you because your body is completely different." So,
Mhm.
I think that's an important perspective that we should all remember. Well, my next question for you is being diagnosed at 36 with stage 2 breast cancer is not what most people expect. What
Mhm.
unique challenges did you face as a younger patient that aren't talked about enough? And you kind of mentioned
Mm.
this before about being
Yeah.
the age that you were.
Yeah. Well, look, I worked at BCRF. I know that 1 in 8 women are gonna get breast cancer in their lifetime. I knew even what my risk factors were, even though traditional risk assessment models never flagged me as high risk. I took all those risk assessment tests. They said, "You're average risk. You have nothing to worry about," at least at the age of 36. W I didn't kid myself to think this will never happen to me, that breast cancer was off the table. But I never expected it to happen at 36 with a 4-year-old at home. We just moved to a new town. We bought our first house. I was looking for preschools. We have boxes we're unpacking. Truly, I just went to sleep one night after unpacking that day and we were sweaty and hot. It was beginning of summer and I just moved over and I felt this lump in my breast. And because I work at BCRF, I happen to know that the 10-year window after you have your first child, you're at an elevated risk for breast cancer, even though having a child lowers your long-term risk for breast cancer. But I knew, you know what? My kid's only 4. Let me just pay attention. I'm going to pay attention to this lump. I'm not going to ignore it. And that's a number one thing I just want everyone to know. Every woman should know this because that risk increases with age, as if you have your first child after the age of 30, especially, that 10-year window is even more important. I was 33 when I had my son, and so I just knew to pay attention to it. So I'm really glad I had that knowledge because I didn't ignore that lump, which turned out to be my worst fear, of course, breast cancer. But not only am I having now to deal with a disease that people imagine happens to older women, I am going through chemotherapy while my son is in pre-K, trying to be a mom and a wife, to make a home for my son, make sure he's not traumatized for life with this experience while still having a relationship with my husband and still, everything about our lives had to flip. I'm also working. So I have to balance my job, my son's life because it's not just like making sure that this kid survives. It's not just like putting him to bed, feeding him, etc. It's also he's in school. What about the Halloween parade? What about, the book
Everything,
fair and this and that? And so it's and how do you tell people? That was something else I was navigating. I had just moved to this new town. I didn't know any of these people. So I'm trying to make mom friends. And here I am with my hat to cover my bald head and wondering, do these people think I'm just obsessed with this hat? Do they know that I'm bald under here? How do I tell them I have cancer? Like, oh, you know, here's how's Johnny's birthday party gonna go? By the way, I have cancer. It's really weird to think about how do you talk about this. That's like there's just so many complex issues when you're younger and even beyond active treatment. The unique challenges. When I started chemo, my we weren't done with our family. We weren't done
Right.
building our family. I had one son. I have spent my entire life with this vision in my head of the family we were going to have. That included two children always, always. And that's I come from a Bengali family. I have there's three kids in my family. I have two sisters. There is no such thing as having an only child in my culture, in my family, right?
Right.
And so when I started chemo, my doctor, is a fantastic doctor, offered it to me. And she said, do you want to do fertility preservation? We can pause. You don't have to start chemo right away. We can do fertility preservation. And I said no, because I was so terrified. And
Mm.
despite all my knowledge, I have all this knowledge through my work. I knew it was safe, but there's this 5 alarm fire siren going off in your head that you cannot hear over. And that siren was too loud for me to process that I could delay treatment for fertility preservation when I was just worrying about, like, am I going to live or die? So the women who do delay treatment, I just want to underscore that's how deeply they desire to have children. Do you know, like, that is so fertility when it comes to younger patients is, I think, the number one issue outside of surviving, outside of not dying is the number one concern. Because you have to be so brave to delay treatment to preserve your fertility. So I am so impressed by those women. I couldn't do it. And so now I have to live with that decision because it's a forever decision. Maybe
Mhm.
not. I could, potentially pause treatment to try, but it's one of those things like a sacrifice that I remember making at the time. So it's those kinds of decisions and challenges that you don't have to make when you're older. When you're older, you don't have to worry about preserving your fertility. You don't have to worry about
Right.
my giving up the ability to have children for the rest of my life. Am I changing my vision for my family and all of those things? So I just, and that's one. There's a myriad of other issues that come along with being a young patient, but certainly those sort of social dynamics of going through active treatment and then
Mhm.
the long-term consequences of what it's like to build your family and the consequences of treatment that you have to live with for hopefully many decades.
You said that fire alarm sound and I can hear
Mhm.
it. You
Mhm.
you hear that kind of almost panic, like, what do I you're telling me I can pause, but
Mhm.
I have cancer. Like, how can I
Yeah.
pause? Like, there's no
Yep.
pause isn't a word that you think of when you get diagnosed with a
Right.
disease like that. Like,
Right.
it's not,
Mhm.
pausing is not something. So I can only imagine the fear that you had
Mhm.
and the fear that other women have and that
Mhm.
go through and how you talk about that. It's really just, it isn't a concern when you're older. But
Mhm.
when you're in your 30s and you haven't even had children yet, that's definitely a really big one. So, I'm
How
interested, you
scary,
said there
how
were
scary for people, like, it's terrifying.
yeah, I can only imagine, and you said that there were a few others. Are there any others that I mean, this one definitely hit you
Mm.
personally and affected your family, but are there other ones that kinda stand out to you that
I
you've seen
think
from your experience?
I think one of the other biggest ones, of course, so number one, the brain fog that comes with chemo and menopause, right? Treatment-induced menopause, if you're on hormone suppressing therapy, if you're at the peak of your career, you are trying to be a boss, you're trying to be successful, you're trying to, you're not trying to delay your growth professionally because of this disease. And so that's one other issue that I think younger women, especially who are at the height of their career or building their career at the start, really so unfair to be handicapped by the fact that the lack of estrogen not providing you with the capacity to think as clearly as you once did. And not just the lack of estrogen, but also the side effects from chemo that last for who knows how long. I think I still have a lot of that chemo side effect brain. But that's one thing. Another thing is also the impact it has on relationships. When I was initially diagnosed, your relationship with your partner, so for me it was my husband, there's a lot of peaks and valleys because at the beginning for me personally, you get really close. For me, we got really, really close because all of the BS just goes away, right? Like all of a sudden you realize how important it is. Like, I really want to live. I really love this person. I really want to live my life with this person. I want to live, right? And so that desire to live helps you forget the little stuff. And it's that part is amazing and it's wonderful and it's something you want to keep forever, even beyond the diagnosis, right? That ability to see the bigger picture. But a lot of times what happens also is like the caretaking dynamic shifts and the roles and responsibilities at home shift. And I have a really involved partner, really involved, he's always been involved pre, cancer, but nonetheless, I'm still the one doing I was doing drop off and pick up and that changed, right? And so there's all of these other little things that really shifted for us. And so once I was done with active treatment, then the roles not shifting and how that shifts again. Like there's all of these challenges with that role reversal that happens multiple times. And more so when you're on endocrine suppressing therapy, like myself, which you have hormone receptor positive disease and you're forced to be in menopause, what used to be called vaginal atrophy or is known now as the genitourinary symptoms of menopause is devastating. It can be devastating to a relationship because now you can't even be intimate with your partner because it's you just can't. You just cannot until you are able to seek help. And I know that, look, I was at at a breast cancer conference and I was seeing these doctors present all of this information specifically on this topic. And they had a slide that said 70% of patients do not report these side effects to their doctor, but they will, like when they're surveyed and polled, this is the biggest problem. But they don't talk about
Interesting.
it because it's really hard to talk about with their doctor. So the point of that presentation was to encourage doctors, talk to your patients
To
about it because they're
ask
not
more
coming to you.
questions.
Yeah, like they're
Yeah.
not going to bring it up to you. And so it's your job to try to help them through it. And I learned also more like the research that's coming out about the fact that while hormone replacement therapy is not an option for most HR positive breast cancer patients, because we're taking drugs to suppress our hormones, there are, for example, the option for vaginal estrogen, which is safe for hormone receptor positive breast cancer patients. And so there reason I bring that up is because relationships suffer. Spouse or your partner is not just a roommate, right? Like this person is someone you are, especially when you're younger, and this is true for older women. This is not actually unique for just younger patients, right? You want to have an intimate relationship with your spouse and then it becomes impossible. And how do you work through that together? And a lot of people don't. I will tell you, there's a stat that female cancer patients are 6 times more likely to get divorced than male cancer patients.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think some of that I know, like, I always talk about that because I feel like one thing people don't realize is just how the impact on relationships, but, I think some women also, when life is too short, you don't put up with stuff you may have put up with before. So I think there is some element there of, not, putting up with stuff anymore.
I wonder if you experience this or if people out there experience this and maybe it's kind of just like what you said, not putting it like anger, frustration in one's body, feeling possibly let down. I don't know if that resonates at all with you.
That's a whole other like, some of the body dysmorphia that happens and, like, just the reacquaintance. You have to meet yourself. First of all, you have to meet yourself again because you as a person, your personality changes to some degree, right? Because your outlook changes, the way you view things change. And so, you have to get to know yourself, and then you have to to know your physical self. So this emotional and spiritual level of yourself that changes. And then there's also the physical part and getting to know your body again, which not only changes because of the fact that you lose the part. For me, I had a double mastectomy. It's not the case for everybody, but in my case, I had a double mastectomy and I also had a deep flap reconstruction. But that part of your body where is traditionally associated with your femininity and all of these ways that in society and at an individual level, we are trained to think of as being part of what makes us female. So there's that. That's a one whole ball of wax. And then in my case, especially post chemo, they had always warned me that you're going to be on a lot of steroids. You're going to probably gain weight. So you have to really be careful. Of course, that happened. I gained a lot of weight post chemo. And then because I'm in treatment induced menopause, it was impossible for me to lose. Just impossible for me to lose. And so I look in the mirror one day and I realize not only is it riddled with scars, abdominal because of the deep, all up here, but the shape of my body is just different. I have it's a new silhouette and I didn't recognize it and I didn't like it. And so that part was a real struggle for me. So I think there's a whole that and the way that that impacts your desire to first of all, you have all of these issues anyway with what I was saying, GSM or vaginal atrophy and being intimate is just physically impossible, but then also not wanting to be because you don't even like your
Mhm,
body. That's a
mhm.
whole other thing.
So I think in summary, it's a loaded answer.
It's a loaded. There's so many
Yeah,
things that I'm forgetting. Like there's so many things that
right.
are even more complex than what I just shared.
I can I can only imagine. So I feel like you may have touched on this before, but if you could redesign the support system for breast cancer patients from the
Mm,
ground up, what are the first three
mm.
resources or interventions would you make standard?
That's such a good question. I have so many ideas, and now I have to whittle this down to 3. Okay.
If
I
you
think
have 4 or
number
5,
yeah.
that's okay
Yeah.
too.
No, I would say I do think it would be fantastic if there was, from the get-go, a connection with either a social worker or therapist. I think straight up, whether think you need it or not, because a lot of people, like, you're just trying to get through treatment. You don't think about your mental health necessarily. You're just wanting to not throw up, right? Or you're just wanting to get home and lay in bed. Regardless,
Right.
I think right from the start, if along with your assigned breast surgeon, assigned oncologist, you have an assigned plastic surgeon, right? Like you've developed that team and there should absolutely be a therapist that's on that team. Of course, it's like that sort of integrated medicine, that sort of thinking about it in terms of an integrated whole body, because part of that would also include a nutritionist. Maybe there's some basic education that would really help you understand the importance of a varied diet, a plant forward diet, probiotics, exercise. Like one thing that I swear by, and I would this is a number 2. This is the second answer to your question is
Mhm.
prescription exercise. I wish doctors would prescribe exercise to their patients because I swear that that is what has mitigated all of my side effects during active treatment and since then. I think I tolerate a lot of drugs very well because of that regular exercise. So that would be number 2 is a prescription exercise.
Okay.
And number 3, I think it would be fantastic to really encourage patients and give them access to, especially young breast cancer patients, a therapist or an integrative medicine specialist that can help them through menopause, a menopause
Mm,
specialist, because that one of the things that we've learned and the data support that treatment-induced menopause is harder. It is harsher than natural menopause. Not only is it harder, but you're experiencing it at 36, immediately
right,
overnight, or at 30,
right.
at 29, at 25, whatever age it is. That's just cruel. Like, that is just mean to not have a menopause specialist to talk you through what that means and what options and what side effects you can expect. And here are the tools and armamentarium of things that you can access should you need. So that's my answer. Those are my 3 things.
Yeah, no, to be in the dark like that, I can only imagine. Just like, I think a lot of people, going back to what we were first talking about, you hear this siren in your head and you're like, I got to go through it. I got to go. I got to do all this stuff. And then you don't take into effect how it's going to tax your body. What does that
Mhm.
mean? How can I maybe stop it from taxing so much? Maybe there's something I can do. Maybe I can exercise more. Maybe I can talk to someone about it. Maybe I can, go to a specialist or work with a nutritionist. There's so many outlets that maybe aren't spoken about enough because we're
Mhm.
just in a hurry, because what we hear, and I think this goes back to the beginning of our conversation, you hear these stories from other people and how they just had possibly a negative experience, and so you're taking that as your own, and you're then going down this road without any assistance, where there's so much out there.
Mhm.
So I think those are great. Why do you think breast cancer rehabilitation still isn't treated as a standard essential part of care, and what needs to change to normalize it?
That's such a good question. It baffles my mind that it's not, right? Because survivorship and the long-term side effects of treatment are so important, and what you were just talking about, like breast cancer rehabilitation, so meaning how do you deal with the long-term side effects, mental, physical, of long-term treatment, and even if you're not in long-term treatment, so if you have, for example, triple negative disease and maybe you're not on hormone suppressing drugs, there's still this long tail of dealing with these surgeries, chemo, radiation, immunotherapy, whatever it is that you're on. I I part of me wonders if it's a women's health issue. And we have struggled always to get attention for women's health issue. Breast
Mhm.
cancer was severely underfunded until one woman decided 30 years ago she's not going to take it anymore. She's going to create the pink ribbon. She's going to go around the country, around the world, and make sure that everyone is aware of this disease. And then founded the Breast Cancer Research Foundation. She said, we need to fund this area of research. And
Mhm.
so I think part of it is that just the topic of women's health, we talk about it a lot nowadays, but talk does not mean action. And so that doesn't solve for the fact that it's still severely underfunded by the federal government and all of these areas. But that's where places like BCRF, I mean, that's why we came into being, right? Like nonprofits come into being because they're trying to fill some sort of dearth, they're trying to fill some sort of gap that exists. So yeah, I don't know what else needs to happen other than more people talking about it, acknowledging it, sharing this kind of information so that patients do have a place to turn to when they're seeking help, because a lot of times they have to seek it on their own.
Yeah, it's sad and it's frustrating, but I guess that's why we have this podcast, so we can talk to
Right, exactly.
different people like you and put it on the map, and more people can hear it. So, you shape how breast cancer is communicated to the public. Has your diagnosis changed the way you think we should be telling these stories?
Mhm. Mm, Fundamentally, it has not changed the way we've told these stories. I think we've always had this really sensitive approach to telling stories. And I think what I've learned is more of why, right? Like, why is it important to share stories, right? And I think part of it is so that the more diverse stories you see about breast cancer, so I'm talking about diversity in terms of stage, in terms of what type of breast cancer, not just HR positive, but also people with DCIS or triple negative or other subtypes of disease, metastatic disease, all of those people need to see themselves in others. And when you see other patients that have experienced what you have, it makes you feel less alone. So I think the way that we have approached that in general through my work has always been to be able to have I have this magazine behind me, this diversity of women and people, but also in terms of disease and disease stage so that patients can see themselves
Mm.
in others. And I think it just helps people feel less alone and more connected. And that's the whole point of storytelling. The whole point of storytelling is to help people feel less alone.
What we're doing now.
Mhm.
Exactly. So I have two more questions left. For someone listening right now who's in the middle of treatment or struggling with side effects after, what do you want them to know that you wish someone had told you?
I wish someone had told me, number 1, I've said this already. I think it's when you're feeling crappy, it can be hard to imagine exercising, but I cannot emphasize that enough because it's kind of a catch 22, like, "Oh, I feel really terrible. I have to myself to get up and exercise," but exercise will help battle fatigue. It helps battle a lot of the side effects that come from treatment, both if you're in active treatment, and not only that, actually, we know now that it actually helps make your treatment more effective. So it works better, and it's, to me, the only form of control I have. I have no control over whether or not this medicine is working inside of my body. I have no control over the cells that are dividing rapidly or not inside of my body, but I can have control over how much exercise I get this week. And if I can make that a priority and see it as an important of a tool as the drugs that I'm taking every morning, that those, 10 minutes of working out, of doing jumping jacks is just as important as that pill that I have to take.
Hmm.
That is, to me, is one thing that I say to everybody when they ask me, "What do you wish or what do you want to know? Or what do you think I should do?" Number 1, start there. And number 2, what I wish I had known that I needed to talk to others. I didn't know that
Hmm.
for a long time because I was like, I'm in the breast cancer space. I talk to people all the time. But talking to
Right.
patients from the viewpoint for me, which is like telling their stories, et cetera, I'm like, talking to people in that way, as opposed to being in conversation with others who've had the same experience as me in a support capacity. I didn't know I needed that until 8 months ago, very recently.
Yeah.
Once I realized how powerful it is to connect with other women in that way and not just like, let me tell your story, but more of a let's talk. I didn't realize I needed that. I don't think I needed realize I needed that. And finally, you asked me for 2. I'm gonna give you one final thing is that I started anti-anxiety meds like in this past, like maybe I think it's been 2 years now. I wish, again, I talked about like I wish they would connect you with a therapist right from the beginning. Whether it's talk therapy, whether it's medication, whatever it is that works for you, it is okay to be overwhelmed and seek help. This is an overwhelming thing. I said catch 22 earlier, but the catch 22 with meds is sometimes you're too anxious to take anxiety meds. And so until you start taking the meds, you don't realize how anxious you were because then you realize, oh, this is not so bad. This is actually totally fine. And it doesn't change who you are. It doesn't change your emotional capacity. But I wish I'd known that earlier. Like I wish I had talked myself into it earlier and didn't force myself to suffer for as long as I did.
I think your 3 points are extremely important, and as a matter of fact, the whole point of speaking to other people and that you realized you needed to do it 8 months ago, it took me, like, 10 years to figure that out,
Yeah.
and when I did, I'm now just like that's part of my position at Well Beyond Breast Cancer is
Hmm.
speaking to other people, helping tell their stories so other
Hmm.
people don't feel alone.
Yep.
Because it takes a lot of guts to realize that you need to talk to someone and
Hmm.
or that you need, to have that realization like I need to go to talk there. Doesn't mean that you're less than or anything. It just means you realize you need the help and get
Hmm.
it, take it,
Hmm.
use it. It is so important. So I think all three so far, I think we should implement everything you've said in this conversation. Ready to go after this
I'm with you.
podcast.
I'm with you. This is what we're doing.
This is what we're doing. So, to close out, we ask this question to everybody that comes on the podcast. What does living well beyond breast cancer mean to you?
Mm. Living well beyond breast cancer, to me, I think it means still seeking and finding joy in everything that you do. Because for a while when I was initially diagnosed, I swear that first week I was convinced like I'm never going to be happy again. I will never be happy again because I will always be waiting for that other shoe to drop, be waiting for it to come back to kill me, or to kill me now. So I just was in such a dark place in the beginning, thinking over and over. And I had my son, and at the time, like when your child is so little, all you can think about is you want to live for them. So like right now, I don't count my birthdays, I count his birthdays. How many of his birthdays am I still here for? But for me, living well beyond breast cancer means, even though I am still waiting for the other shoe to drop, that fear never goes away. You can still be happy in the in between, and you can really find, the little things that, what there's this saying, like happiness comes on Tuesdays, it's those little everyday things where you can really find joy and connection. And I will say also those social connections that I've made post cancer are something I would never give up, because this community of breast cancer patients, this community of survivors is so unlike anything I've ever experienced before, because we have this shared bond. And for that, I am grateful to cancer.
Sadia, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to share your story and to educate us, to tell
Mm,
us about your experience so that we can learn, so that we can share this with someone else that maybe is
mm,
going through the same thing, and so they're less alone. So
yeah.
thank you so much for joining us. And thank you to everyone who's been listening. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us on the Well Beyond Breast Cancer podcast. If today's conversation moved you, please subscribe and share it with someone who may find it useful. We'll be back next month. Until then, keep advocating for the care you need. Your quality of life matters.